Hello, I'm Laura Washington, and I am proud president of Block Club Chicago. I'm also a contributing columnist for the Chicago Tribune and political analyst for ABC7 Chicago. Welcome to Block Club Chicago, the ballot, and to our conversations with those who would be mayor. We are back with another candidate who is vying for Chicago's top job. And today I'm really happy to welcome Sophia King. Sophia King is the alderperson representing the Fourth Ward, as well as the chair of the Progressive Caucus of the Chicago City Council. Alderman King is known for pushing for renaming of Lakeshore Drive and Congress Parkway after Jean Baptiste Point-du-Sable and Ida B. Wells, respectively. She's also backed an increase in the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour and to the redevelopment of the vacant Michael Reese Hospital site. She touts her collaborative style and experience in the city council, where she represents a diverse swath of the city from Hyde Park to the Loop. She grew up in Evanston and has a graduate degree in education and social policy from Northwestern University. She previously worked for the Latin School in Chicago and founded the Ariel Community Academy, which is a public school in Kenwood that opened in 1996. Welcome, Alderman. It's good to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
So how's it going out on that campaign trail?
It's going well. I think our message is resonating with people. We certainly have to get it out to more people. And so that's what we're doing these last few weeks. But our message is resonating with people.
And what would you say is your main message?
Together with collaboration, we can get a lot of things done. I've been able to show that over the last 6.5 years by getting things done, even in the middle of a pandemic, but really just bringing people together and whether it's leading the fight for a $15 minimum wage or leading what's being heralded as the most equitable one of the most equitable developments in the country at Michael Reese, or whether it's pushing, civilian oversight over the line, or whether it's, renaming Congress Parkway to Ida B. Wells, which, hadn't been done in 50 years, or DeSable Drive, or having increased minority participation in the Fourth Ward with billions of dollars of procurement. We have really been getting things done, and you'll see all parts of the ward growing, and we want to continue to do that on the fifth floor.
And it sounds like, just based on what I know about your work, is that you have done a lot of work that's had an impact citywide. Even though you're just one of 50 aldermen, you have been out there in the trenches addressing issues for the entire city. So, but just let's back up for a minute and just I want to get a little bit personal and ask you for maybe 2 or 3 examples of things in your personal background that you think uniquely qualify you to be mayor of Chicago.
So, yeah, I just stated, kind of over the last 6 years, I think, running the Fourth Ward is like a microcosm of the city. You mentioned I represent from downtown, which has all of the amenities: Soldier Field, Northerly Island, Grant Park, museum campus, and 5 times as much lakefront as anyone else. But I also have some of the poorest and under-resourced parts of the ward, or excuse me, of the city as well. So I see the disparities, and we've been able to bring real equity to those places. And so that's something I want to continue to do. I represent also a ward that's about 40% white, 50% African American, and 10% other, some Latino and Asian. And, all parts of the communities are very diverse communities. Most wards are pretty monolithic, but, as you mentioned, we've got, Hyde Park, Kenwood, North Kenwood, Oakland, Grand Boulevard, South Loop, downtown. We've got, many areas that have, a difference of residents and cultural diversity as well as economic diversity, and we've been able to show upsize for all of our communities. We certainly lead with equity as our North Star, but certainly people who don't necessarily need as much as other communities also see upside, and we certainly want to bring that type of collaborative effort to the fifth floor.
So that's a really good summary of a lot of what you've done professionally, particularly as alderman. But I want to talk a
Mhm.
little bit more about your personal history in terms
Sure.
of, where'd you grow up? Tell us
Yeah.
something. Tell us something that you think is really relevant that makes you a
Yeah.
good would make you a good mayor in terms of your personal background.
Yeah, I think, I grew up in Evanston and Mississippi. I think that's important. Evanston, which is probably one of the most diverse and culturally competent, small towns, and then to go to Jackson, Mississippi, where I spent formative years, eighth, ninth, 10th grade, and came back and graduated from Evanston Township. My mother literally went from picking cotton in the Mississippi Delta to, Evanston. And that's kind of, how we got here. I think that has truly informed, who I am and how my mother had to, kind of pick cotton to help out with the family and take care of her siblings. But she did it with pride and did it well. And so all of those things, I think, form kind of who I am, the diversity and the cultural competency that we had at Evanston and Evanston school systems, which had quotas on purpose. A lot of folks don't know that. So
Mhm.
all of our grades were, very integrated, and I think that helped formulate my. I'm calling it cultural competency as well. And so between that and then, growing up in Mississippi, which was more segregated, I've been able to, kind of use those as, really informative background or as background that informs me on a lot of decisions, which is why equity is truly, I think, something that runs through every strand of what we've been doing here in the Fourth Ward, and will truly be something that we lead by on the fifth floor. True equity. And
Mhm.
I want to emphasize that
True
because
equity. Is that an implied criticism of the work that the current mayor is doing in terms, because she makes equity. She talks about equity all the time, and that's a real hallmark of what she wants to put forward in her administration.
Yeah. So, certainly I'd be remiss if I said that, she hasn't done some things well, but, I think there's been kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors, especially with the Invest Southwest. She uses a lot of developments that she had nothing to do with. But the irony is that we share the same constituencies, so we should be
Mhm.
collaborating over these efforts. And then a lot of them, aren't equitable. If you talk about, her trying to really, I think, cut African Americans out of cannabis. If we had stopped it in the city, that was something where African Americans and Latinos could have started off on somewhat of an equal footing. And
What did she do to cut out African Americans from cannabis?
yeah, that's a good question. So, uh, cannabis wasn't legal in the city yet. So, it was our suggestion, a number of people, to stop cannabis in the city until the state went back and changed some of the legislation, which really, gave what I would say Black and brown people a get out of jail free card, which is great. But we couldn't pass go or collect 200. There was no economic incentive. And these social equity, applicants, there was just, a way where they could really get out of that. I mean, you really could be a social equity applicant and not really have any impact or growth, wealth growth in the African American community. So we suggested that we stop it here. And she blocked that. I mean, quite frankly, she said, her friend Kelly Cassidy was carrying the bill, and that was water under the bridge. And that was short
Mhm.
sighted. It wasn't water under the bridge. We should have stopped it so that we could have had, true equity.
Mhm.
I can just point to other things, closing Michael Reese Hospital in the middle of Bronzeville. It was a very vibrant hospital. It didn't suffer for a lack of people going to it. But, she let a billionaire company, get out of their commitment to our community, and then stands up, $100 million um, site during COVID at at McCormick Place, which is great, but all of that money went to one majority contractor. There was no equity in that, and it serviced three or four people. So those are just some of the things I think. Another piece in terms of equity, I mean, African American contracts are down under this administration.
Mhm.
Though I follow the money. There's billions of dollars at the airport, billions of dollars at the city, billions of dollars at our sister agencies, and contracts, in the African American community are down. Contracts for women are down, and as an African American woman, that should be something that she's paying attention to. So I think, kind of the equity piece is really trying to pander to votes right now, but there really isn't a true track record of that.
Okay. You started off by saying that there are some things you would give her credit for. Give me a couple examples of things you think she's done right.
I think, Invest Southwest, I think, marketing that is important. I think it's important to build up those communities. I just, haven't seen the results of those, any of those yet. And they're also, kind of a lack of collaboration with the city council on things like that.
Well, those are just
But
more
that said,
criticisms. Those are more
well,
criticisms.
I said the coining of it. I listen. I tried really, really hard to work with Lori, with the mayor, because I wanted to see her be successful. Her success is our city's success. It's just been difficult in terms of really that collaboration and working with people to get things done, and
Mhm,
so that's been a challenge for a number of folks. It's really not personal. We just can't grow as a city, with that type of leadership, and
mhm.
with there's four big constituencies in our city, our teachers, our police, the business community, and the labor community. And I would say that a lot of those folks have lost trust. And so it's hard to move forward when that trust is broken.
Okay. So you are an alderman, and you have clearly you have a lot of experience, and as I mentioned, you have a lot of experience with citywide issues. But it's
Hmm.
tough for an alderman to become a mayor in Chicago. It's a sitting alderman has never been elected by voters to the fifth floor, so it would be a real rarity. And we I talked about this in a recent column that I called you the blue lobster in the race because
Yeah.
the blue lobster, for everybody that doesn't know about that delicious animal out east, a blue lobster is a lobster that's unusual. It's a different color. You don't see them very often,
Right.
and so I called you the blue lobster, but and partly because it would be a real tough climb to go from being an alderman to city hall. Are you?
Yeah.
How's the
No,
blue lobster doing?
yeah, I think we're doing well. I don't think we've seen, all of the other categories who are, vying for this position become mayor as well, whether it's the commissioner or whether it's a congressman, or,
Oh,
well, Harold Washington.
Harold
Okay.
Washington, right?
Given
That's a big
that
one.
he's a rare case. But,
Mhm,
so I think people are looking at individuals. With 16 of my colleagues leaving, we really need somebody who understands how the sausage is made. We can't have somebody who's flying the plane, building it at the same time. We just did that. It didn't work out well for us. So, understanding how things are done in City Hall is important. Being able to work with the City Council is important. Being able to collaborate around issues and not spend so much energy and time arguing around things that we don't really have to argue about. That's how it's been. That's why so many of my colleagues are leaving. That's why, there's tension between the police in this administration and the teachers, and so we really need to kind of shift how we do things in the city. And again, I've been able to show, even during difficult times, how you can come together and get things done. And I think I applaud the mayor for her public service, especially during COVID, during social unrest. I think the beat she missed was really during, some of these hard incredibly difficult times, that was the opportunity to truly bring us together as a city. And there was just more attacking people than problems, and so I want to bring a different approach to that. And like I said, we've been able to do some difficult things and bringing people together. As chair of the Progressive Caucus, I represent a pretty diverse swath of folks, and we've been really able to do some things, and so I again want to bring those efforts to the fifth floor. And I think also we need somebody who really understands how to represent the entire city, not segregated portions of it. And I see, with some of the other candidates, that they don't really grow outside of their base. And we grow in the Black community, we grow in the white community, and we also grow in the Latino community. And so I think it's important, at this juncture, with all of the dissension, to come together as a city. And I'm offering real solutions to crime, real solutions to some of the root causes of crime, as well as some of the immediate responses to crime. And I think those things are really important, and they've been, based on a lot of what I've learned while
Right.
running.
Well, let's talk about crime, because clearly that has been the most dominant issue in this campaign, the
Sure.
top of the list for many voters. What is everybody in this race says they have a plan to fight and reduce crime. What
Sure.
what is your plan, and how does that differ from your competition?
Yeah, I keep saying my plan is one that the mayor should implement right now. We have a plan that puts more police in all of the communities where they belong immediately, just by changing to a 4-day on, 3-day off shift. So currently, we have 3 shifts in a district. So if you've got 90 officers, then you've got 30 on each shift. If you go to 2 shifts, or still a 40-hour week, but go 4 days on, 3 days off, you get 45 per shift. So it's up to 50% more officers. So they're in neighborhoods and in communities during good times, and to mitigate bad times. It also, helps to, make sure that, again, officers are in the place where they need them the most, and then, to be more equitably distributed. We're also calling on, what we call a Chicago Reserve, or bringing back retired officers. Again, who really would love to come back and help the city. And by the way, their pensions and things are already paid. And so they can be in areas where we have surge, maybe there's festivals or social unrest going on. You don't have to pull, the beat officers outside, out of their communities in order to do that. So that's something we would do right away. We also have a plan that gets to root causes. We have a really, a good plan that puts hundreds of millions of dollars into violence intervention. It gives incentives for young, mostly Black and Brown individuals to come into the legal market, or and that incentive comes with job training, um, trauma informed care, wraparound services for the individual and their families. And it's a community approach where the pastors, the law enforcement would sit down with individuals who we know are heading down the right path and say, hey, listen, here's some resources to help you go down the right path. And I think if we do that, we have the resources right now. We
Mhm.
won't have them in several years, but in several years, if we do this right, we should put a dent in, and those individuals who might not be on the right path, and so that we're not back here in 20 years. It's been done in other cities. It's partially being done, in Chicago, but those programs need to scale up. They're not offering, to me, enough incentive and other things. So, and
You're
then,
talking about the anti-violence programs I know you've been
yes,
critical of the mayor. You felt that she hasn't put enough money into those. So you said you want to put
well,
millions in. How much money are you committing
yeah,
to in your first year in office, and then putting in anti-violence programs? And
right.
how much money in it? You also, you mentioned bringing up the ranks of the police. How many more
Mhm.
police officers do you plan to put into place, either through bringing back retired officers or other ways.
Yeah, I I'll hit those both. So we're calling on a couple of 100 million, from the city, and then I'm hoping we can also get, 50 million from the state, 50 million from the county. Everybody's doing their own thing. The state has their money, they're doing their own thing. The county has their own money, they're doing their own thing. There's no collaboration around,
Mhm.
this effort. So I would take advantage of economies of scale and come together and collaborate around that, bring a department, of gun violence intervention, and so that there's some focus there. So that's what I would do
So
there.
you created a Department of Gun Violence Intervention
Oh, sure.
and funded with a couple
Yeah.
$100 million, but then
Se-
also try to coordinate with
yeah, several
other
hundred
government
million.
agencies.
And
Okay.
I would bring corporations into that as well. I mean, they're asking what they can do, corporations like McDonald's, and I wouldn't slap them back. I would say, listen, here are some direct things that you can do. You can bring, the rest of your CEO friends and C-suite folks, and let's put some money behind this, since this is the issue that is impacting us all. So resources are important. When we've been here in the 90s, the 70s. We shouldn't do it again. But I think one paradigm shift, which with if I could put out there, is when we were here in the 40s, when there was Italians and Irish fighting over alcohol and the control of alcohol. We put resources into it. We called it the New Deal. We called it a 30-year mortgage. We called it the GI Bill. And then we literally ended up with Lincoln Park. And so we can certainly put resources towards that. But that's not
Mhm.
the only response. What I'm offering is, we also need to uplift the police. They're part of the solution, not the only solution. Like I said, we need to get to the root causes as well in a very significant way. We also need to implement alternative responses to policing. And these are ways. So, for instance, in 2022, we allocated $85 million for violence intervention for this mayor. And in 2022, I don't think she got $5 million out the door. If
Mhm.
it's a priority for you, you have to move that money. And the same with the mental health first responders or alternative responses to policing. We know that over 50% of calls to 911 are for nonviolent issues like mental health insecurities, like homelessness, and other issues around poverty. So we need people who are trained to respond to those things, respond to those. We put a pilot program, myself and a couple other colleagues in the streets, and it hasn't been escalated. We've given money for it to be escalated. If
You're
this
talking
is your
about in your
priority,
ward. You're talking about.
no, I'm talking about
Okay.
citywide. As a
Yeah,
city council,
what's the
there are
program?
dollars that have been allocated but
Mhm.
haven't been spent.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So, public safety is obviously an important issue, but also police community relations. We've seen
sure,
terrible. The most recent, it didn't happen here. It happened in Memphis, but it's symbolic of what's happening all over the country. The Tyree Nichols, the terrible case of
sure.
his beating by police. We had Laquan McDonald. We've had so many examples. What is your plan? We have a consent decree in place. There's supposed to be This is supposed to be a new day in terms of police community relations, but we still continue to have these tragic incidents. What's your plan for ensuring that we never have another Laquan McDonald or Tyree Nichols in Chicago ever again?
Yeah, training is super important. I mean, I forced myself to watch the Tyree Nichols video, and as a mother, as a grandmother, when he was yelling, for his own mother, that was gut wrenching. And then, to find out that his life was also taken by five other African American um, men as well. It just showed you the value or lack thereof that is put on an African American life, especially a Black male, including by one of their own.
Mhm.
And so it's a sad tale. So the cultural training and training on de-escalation and cultural competency is important, and it goes across racial lines. I think also the display of the lack of value was on display as well. I'm happy that the officers were swiftly fired, and I'm happy that that charges are being brought, but we don't see that when it's a white officer doing that. But even there, you saw the lack of value for even those officers. They were wrong. Don't get me
Right.
wrong, but I've never seen that type of swift, bringing kind of or trying to bring folks
Mhm.
to justice. So yeah, so training is important. I
What
went
about the consent
bowling
decree?
with
Where do you feel
Oh,
a
yeah,
consent
fire
decree is?
fire the proud boy, not the
Mhm.
guy who's over the consent decree. Those are things that send a message. I was bowling with officers, not in uniform, they're just regular people, literally, they're our brothers, our sisters, our uncles and aunts, and they want accountability as well for bad officers. They make them look bad. And so when you don't fire the proud boy and you fire the guy who's over the consent decree because he wants to bring real resources, that sends a bad message. The Anjanette Young case, when
Mhm.
you don't resolve those types of issues that are very um, in your face. uh, that makes people, I think, lose confidence
Sure.
in leadership. And so those are things that I would do differently. The Anjanette Young thing is really sad because we were really just talking about clarifying what a no knock warrant is,
Mhm.
or a knock and announce. Hers was a knock and announce, and people are conflating the two. Where you're supposed to knock, and we're saying, okay, well, what does that knock mean? Let's wait a few minutes or seconds, I believe is what we came to, like 30 seconds before you bang in. Otherwise, it's just a no knock warrant. And
Mhm.
there's a different process for that. And then, just not pointing guns at kids. I mean, these are really simple things that you can do to send a message about how we're going to hold people accountable who are doing bad things. But I continue to say that we can't throw that blanket across every officer. I'm mindful that every black man feels that they've been blanketed with this condemnation of them,
Mhm.
because there are some bad actors, but majority of black men are good men. And so we have to be careful of that too. And that's why I'm saying we can uplift the police and hold them accountable. We can have safety and justice. They're not mutually exclusive, but we have to be very intentional about that. And that means, again, when you have the opportunity to fire somebody who is emblematic of the problem, we should do it swiftly. And certainly those who are trying to bring more justice, keep them around. And those are, I think, the type of messages that we need to send. But I think again, safety, it's comprehensive. We certainly have to get at the consent decree in a meaningful way. I don't think anybody, including the monitor, feels we've been doing that. We have to do that
We're behind schedule on much of the
behind
implementation.
schedule. And again, just not doing the things in a very intentional and deep way where people feel like, oh yes, this is really important to the
Mhm.
city of Chicago.
So,
So
it's very important for you. One of the things you would do would be to be very intentional, send a message
sure,
that you're serious. So that's
I would
appreciate
I
that.
would send the message that I'm very serious about the consent decree. I would
Mhm.
send the message that I'm very serious about uplifting police. I would send the message that I'm equally as intentional about putting real violence intervention programs. We've been dealing with ECCSC or ex-cons for community and social change in our ward. Right now, we need to escalate programs like that. Their leader told me one time that a cub knows when a lion is in the room, which resonated with me. And they understand, that we, have been there, done that, but that we also care and love, you as an individual, and we don't want you to go down the path,
Mhm.
that you're headed in. We need that type of interaction and the community interaction with individuals, who are heading down the wrong path. And so we certainly can be compassionate. And then the other thing is the alternative responses to policing. We've got to bring those folks in. I always say that there's two professions where we throw everything at their feet that we as a people are unable to solve. That would be police and teachers, and they're both leaving faster than we can keep them. So you asked earlier, how do I pay for this? Well, we've got 1,600 vacancies, and we're losing more people. We're losing people faster than we can keep them, and
Mhm.
so the retired officers, I would bring them back quickly. They already have a pension and healthcare
Right.
and all of those things, so they can work part time, and we have those boots on the ground. The shift change, there's no money added to that. It's still a
Mhm.
40-hour week. It's like you working, 10-hour days for 4 days a week, and then you're off on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the
Right.
police get the time that they need to rest, to rejuvenate, to take care of their mental health, and then they're back at it. And then we get more police in the communities during good times before something happens. And that's, I think, what people are looking for. They
Okay.
really want officers to serve and protect them, probably in a very ideal way. We certainly,
Mhm.
again, have to deal with issues in the police department that are very cultural and systemic, and we have to get at those as well, and the violence intervention and the alternative responses. And we have to do it, all at once. And we're the city of
Right.
big shoulders. We
Mhm.
can do it. We've got
Mhm.
money and institutional knowledge and the human capital to do it.
So, and you mentioned mental health, and you mentioned in terms of police officers, but so many people think we have a mental health crisis in the city, and there's been many people have called to reopen publicly run, city-run mental health clinics. What's your
Yeah.
position on reopening mental health clinics in the
Yeah,
city?
so I certainly think we should move to open them. I don't know that we have to open them all, so I would certainly do an analysis of that. But what's not happening at those clinics is they're not resourced enough. So you're talking that they're failing. And by the way, we have as many mental health clinics are mental health patients that come to those clinics as they do to the federally qualified places that are receiving resources from the city. But those clinics are under resources. They're dilapidated. It's not something that would is inviting. So we have to put those resources there. We certainly can fund other private places as well. But I think we have to have a public option that's there. We have to also have options that are in the communities where people can get to them. So it's not the case right now that we have those. So we've, fought to, increase clinicians at these clinics. We
Hmm.
are in a mental health crisis. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic.
Pandemic,
Uh,
right?
and but yeah, mental health is huge. It's huge for our young people. It's huge for adults. And so we certainly have to get at it at a very meaningful way. And I think looking at the clinics and the state of those is something that we need to do. But I brought this up, when Ron was mayor. I was the only one talking about bringing opening those clinics back up, and
Hmm.
so this is something. And I was able to go around to all of them, and I have one in my ward, and they're dilapidated. They're
Hmm.
almost purposely, I think, being under resourced, and then
Right.
you say, oh well, they're not working well. You have to put money, time, effort, and be intentional about that.
Another, you mentioned huge is a huge issue. Another huge issue is the schools and education, and we
Sure.
like to spend a little bit of time on that. WBEZ has a new report out that notes that the Chicago's public school system has shrunk by more than 100,000 students over the last couple of years. It
Hmm.
faces a projected budget deficit of as much as $600 million by 2026. The schools are emptying out. About 95 elementary schools have fewer than 250 students,
Sure.
and 22 high schools have fewer than 250 students. What is your plan to address the dropping enrollment in underutilized schools in the city?
Yeah.
And are you willing to consider closing some of those schools?
Yeah. So we have a really comprehensive plan on education. Most people know I'm a former teacher, educator, and so this is really my wheelhouse. And I also think that we can't really continue to grow as a city if we don't have safety and good schools. So I would take the approach of trying to build back neighborhoods first. And so I think part of the way to do that is to have good schools. So I'm calling for, increasing selective enrollment with a neighborhood component. For instance, Kenwood in my ward right now, which has test scores like Jones, which is another selective enrollment school that's in my ward. But Kenwood is a neighborhood high school, but it has a seventh and eighth grade selective enrollment, and then it opens up to the neighborhood. So we need to kind of spread those types of schools around so people have viable options. Then we need to also at the same time, build housing stock. I've talked about opportunity zones is a vehicle that we've missed that other cities have used to grow communities. We can put billions of dollars on the south and west side, build housing stock. It's a vehicle that allows individuals to invest their money and after 10 years pull it out tax free. You don't get that anywhere else except offshore somewhere. So that's a vehicle we can use to not only grow our communities but also to grow wealth. So I'm suggesting that in those 10 years, you have rental units, and then after that, those could be turned to housing, condos and things of that nature. So we could grow our communities rapidly. Then I would take some of the increment that's coming to those communities because of new taxpayers and the such, and TIF that into increments and put that back into the community to not only grow the schools but to grow small businesses, to grow other businesses in the community. So my approach will be to try and grow our school because our students, most of the 100,000 students you're talking about are African American students.
Mhm.
Our demographics are the only ones that aren't growing. We're shrinking, and the other demographics, white, Latino, Asian, are all seeing growth. So I think we have to be intentional about putting resources. I also think bringing the trades back to the schools in a meaningful way is super important. It takes the fifth floor to leverage that process. Right now, you can't get into an apprentice program until after you've graduated, and you have to be 18. I think we should leverage the fifth floor to bring those apprentice programs and work programs for tech and other jobs of the future back into the schools, 11th and 12th grade. So our young people
How does
know.
the mayor do that? How does the mayor?
Yeah, you sit down with labor. You sit down
Okay.
with labor,
Hmm.
and you show them, in the past, we did this, so a lot of folks who graduated from Dunbar or some of the other trade schools, CVS, the trades were in the schools and the apprentice programs were there, and there were actually, job opportunities for the students as they were in school. We have to do that. Not all kids will want to prepare for college, and so we have to prepare them for our jobs of the future. If you think about opening up the hood of a car, when you think about chips and all of the other technology that goes into that, it's different than what it used to be. We have to prepare our kids for the future, and that's another thing. I think we should be the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. And so
Hmm.
another thing is I would bring STEM into those schools as well in a very meaningful way, and take companies like Google and even Deere is here. Their digital department is here talking about automation and the jobs for the future. And those are things that our young people need to take part in, and be introduced to that, while they're still engaged and in school. And speaking of engagement, after school programming is something that I would seek to have mandatory. There's no reason K through 12, pre-K, well, why our young people shouldn't be engaged with what I call co-curricular, but really after school programming, to, get at whether it's athletics, the arts, poetry, what have you. Those are things that we need to take the opportunity of having kids in school and keeping them engaged after school. There's no reason that we shouldn't have that throughout our public school system. So again, it's a comprehensive approach to it, building up the community, through incentives for housing and to bring housing stock back to all of these communities that have vacant lots, building the community around great schools. So I would,
Mhm.
use again the increment to try and build new schools and use some of the tax incentives to also do that as well, so that we
Mhm.
can have communities that work again, and not have all of these vacant lots and businesses that have left the community and grocery stores. I mean, we really, I think, should use the schools to catapult neighborhoods back to, being the center of life for everybody,
Right.
So
Now,
that,
I didn't hear you answer the question as to whether you'd be willing to close schools if necessary. I mean, this
yeah,
is a
so
very
I,
comprehensive approach, but given given
yeah,
all the financial pressures on the schools and given the loss of enrollment, that might
yeah.
be necessary. Are you willing to do that if necessary?
Yeah, so the moratorium, I think, is until twenty
Hmm.
twenty five. So I have some time to think about that. Again, my first approach would not be that. Do I think there are probably reasons where we need to visit that? Yes, but that conversation should be had with the community so you can understand the repercussions of that as well as the upsides, of a decision like that. And I think, the moves of the past have taught us, that it's not necessarily, a good thing to move so fast and make decisions like that have, other implications, including, um, um, budgetary implications that way outweigh
Hmm.
the decision. So, did we save money by doing that? I don't think so.
Hmm.
Are we losing money through lack of engagement? You know, per capita income that we get from the federal government, just by having our kids in school, is hundreds of millions of dollars that we miss because of the attrition that we have. So we
Right.
could bring more money back if we, really geared our focus on, making sure we had great viable schools in the community, making sure we had good housing stock and a business corridor that's thriving and having all the amenities in the community. And this is where I see Chicago is an upside. I see a lot of positive things. We're not New York, we're not San Francisco, where it's so inexpensive or so expensive to live, that it's cost prohibitive. We build up these communities, we can really have livable spaces, and again capturing the tech businesses to come here and to help us train our kids for the jobs of the future. I think that industry, we have some of the best universities surrounding us, and that
Right.
talent goes out of state. We have to harness it and keep it here, and really seek to, again, what I would say is make Chicago the Silicon Valley of the Midwest.
Hmm.
Listen, we've got water. The West Coast doesn't
We've
have
got we've got
water.
we've got
Uh,
huge assets in this city. No
we do,
denying that.
and
Yeah.
I see all of that as
Mhm.
positive. I just think, we need a course correct. We certainly have to get to the safety and good schools. People aren't
Right.
gonna come or stay here unless it's safe and they have good schools. It's just, it's
Pretty
not rocket
fundamental.
science. Yep.
Exactly. We only have about 15 minutes left, and I have a few more things I want to get to, particularly
Sure.
some of the issues that Block Club Chicago has covered and it has a strong interest in. And one is the whole issue of bicycling and the safety related to that. As you know, there's been a series of tragic accidents in recent years
Yeah.
involving bicyclists in the city, and there have been
Yes.
incidents of blocked bike lanes or hit cyclists.
Mhm.
What is your plan for improving bicycle safety infrastructure, and what specifically would you do to make our roadways safer for bicyclists and pedestrians?
Yeah. So yes, those are two of the most unprotected forms of transportation. Pedestrians first, and then bicyclists second. So I would continue to make protected bike lanes. We've done, I think, proactive job of that in the fourth ward. I would continue that. I would have those. Concerned constituents at the table. That's just my style to really understand that. But again, I would take a page from other cities. In New York, there's no turn on red. I don't understand, especially downtown, why we can't have no turn on red, where a lot of accidents can be prohibited, by that sweeping change. I
Is
would
that
also
is that ever been proposed in the city council? It's in
it
your experience, or
it it
it
hasn't,
seems
and
pretty
I
simple.
it hasn't, but as I've been, thinking about things to better the city, when I visit other cities, I can't help but notice some of the things that I feel are working there and statistically, are working there. But, accidents from turning, and you've probably been in the situation yourself where you turn, you've got a blind spot kind of,
Hmm.
so no turn on red, especially, downtown, I think. I would also seek to lower the speed limit in communities because I've done a lot of studies where people want to in the community figure out ways to mitigate speeding in the neighborhood, and the studies will come back and say, oh, there's not an issue, and but the issue is that it's 30 miles per hour, and so it feels like you're speeding, it's too
Hmm.
fast. So I would lower that to perhaps 20 miles per hour. I think those are things we can do immediately. Quite frankly, I would probably increase the speed limit on Lake DuSable Drive. Wow, DuSable Drive, because 45. I think 55 is probably the good there, but I would seek
And
to.
everyone is doing it at 55
Everybody's
anyway.
doing 70 and 80, and by the way, you can bring some equity and fines and really fund your pensions, if you had cameras there. So, I vocally, was against lowering the threshold for the speed cameras, not because I didn't believe in safety, but because it was disproportionately impacting poor Black and brown people, even though you've got these quartiles where so many cameras are supposed to be, but even in those quartiles, they're not in the areas that impact people with more wealth. For instance, there's no speed cameras in Lincoln Park. There's none on Michigan Avenue. And I had colleagues raise their hand to say, hey, we can provide some equity here and redistribute these cameras and then lower the threshold. And by the way, you can make more money, be more equitable, and provide more safety. And these are, to me, the false narratives that we've been having. We started a whole argument around this that didn't really need to happen. But those are the types of decisions and things I would do around providing more safety. Also, just increasing resources for our public transportation system. Again, we need collaboration in order to make this a true world class transportation system. The federal government, who just gave us money, I think it was about 29 million for electric buses. They see us competing with Pace and Metra as separate
Hmm.
entities, but regional transportation systems like New York and Boston got hundreds of millions of dollars, and so we miss out on that. And so really bringing a regional approach again will help us save money. Probably seek to have similar fares across all systems so that again we can increase ridership, but also use economies of scale to work on the issues that we have together.
Right. Well, really related to that, safety on the CTA has been a very big issue lately. What's your plan to increase safety
Yeah,
and cut down on violence on the CTA?
you can do some low hanging fruit, like just keep it clean.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cleanliness brings safety. I mean, that's why even me, cleaning our own lots in the city, they are some of the most, ill kept lots, in our city. That's on us. So cleanliness, obviously, I think, the money that we're spending on privatizing security, we could use either violence intervention folks or bring our own police back. Retired officers could certainly serve in that role, I think. So again, we're not saving money by doing that, but we also have to make sure that it's reliable. But the safety, I think, is the thing that's keeping most people from riding it, but also the cleanliness and the reliability. So you have to, increase all of those. And I would go to the safety and the cleanliness first. And I think that would start to bring, people back, and making sure that places are well lit, that, small things that people are doing wrong on the CTA should be held accountable, so that people start to, you know, um,
You mean, what do you mean by
feel.
small, what do you mean by small things?
Yeah, I think, people jump turnstiles.
Mhm,
They,
mhm,
all of those are small
mhm,
indications that, it's kind of the wild, wild west, and you can do anything.
mhm.
People,
And that sense,
it's
it creates a perception that can create crime or encourage more crime.
It yeah, it does, and
Mhm,
that's why I think it's important to have, officers, law enforcement in places during times when there isn't an issue, and that's really what people want. They wanna see folks walking their blocks, riding on bikes, in good times, so that they feel secure
mhm.
about, crime that may arise. But right now, that accountability isn't there. Arrests are down 75%.
Right.
Nobody's talking about that. Our clearance
Mhm,
rates are some of the lowest in the country. No crimes are being solved. And
mhm,
that's why, I would bring back retired detectives. Again, was bowling with some the other night, and they would love to come back, and work part-time, still have their pension and their health benefits to help our city out. So we should do that. New York has 4,000 retired officers that they use. I'm suggesting we can get to 1,000, very readily. And like I said, because of all the vacancies, we have the money to pay for that. We also need to incentivize, our teachers and our first responders, to come and live in these communities that I was talking about earlier. Where we want to build housing stock. I
mhm.
would incentivize teachers first, and our police and first responders to, have no interest loans, down payment assistance, to move in these communities,
Right.
where we want the vibrancy to come back. And those are good things. My sister's a teacher, and she said I would do that.
Mhm,
And so, again, those are the two professions that we lay everything at them that we can't solve, and ask them to do everything. But they're also the professions that are leaving the city at a very high rate. We cannot
mhm.
keep up with attrition for both. So,
Right.
we in order to have great schools, we have to have, great teachers, and so we've got to incentivize them.
So you mentioned bowling a couple of times. Is that one of the things you do to have fun? Bowling?
Yeah, I don't bowl that often. I'm a
Okay.
mean bid whist player, so
Oh.
if I'm gonna have fun.
Ooh.
So, fun fact,
Mhm,
when I'm the mayor of the city of Chicago, we will have the biggest bid whist tournament in the country. So that will bring, visitors here, hotels will help fill that out. But yeah, I play bid whist. That's one way I relax. I also
mhm,
run. I'm a runner. I try not to make any hard decisions without running. It keeps my mind clear, but also my body as well. And so, those are kind of two things. And I just, like being around good friends. And
mhm.
so Bidwiz gives me the opportunity to do that,
Yeah.
having a game of
So what?
four people.
So what's a bid whist term? I mean, is that something that goes on in other cities? And we do and you
Yeah,
do?
they have
Yeah.
smaller ones, even
Hmm.
even in the city of Chicago. But I would make this like a destination, once a year, the biggest Bidwiz tournament in, the country, and fill up the hotels and have fun.
Hmm.
I would play myself. And so those are things we have to think about, ways to put Chicago on the map again in a positive way.
Hmm.
And that's something that I would, seek to do. Just make sure that we market, the great things that are going here. Like I said,
Hmm.
this is the best city, in the country. I love the diversity. People talk about, how can we desegregate our communities. I don't know that that is a question. I mean, if people choose to live where they have affinities, that's fine with me. But as long as other people aren't run out if of the community. But I love the diversity. I love going to other communities and where the culture is on display,
Yeah.
and I love that about the city of
But there's
Chicago.
also, but we're also known as for being a tale of two cities too.
Sure.
That there's a
Yeah,
lot of
I
inequity
and I
across the
and I
city.
see that in the ward. Like I said,
Hmm.
I have two police districts. One's downtown
Hmm.
and one's further south. I see the disparities play out, the tale of two cities. I see it, in what happens downtown versus Bronzeville. And so, I'm very familiar with the issues that are facing the city of Chicago. But again, with 16 of my colleagues leaving, with all of the dissension that's there, we really need somebody, with a proven track record of bringing people together, of not starting our narrative on the fringes, because, we've got some of my, candidates are defund the police. A couple of them are, and the others are
Hmm.
kind of law and order. And the reality is most people know that we can, uplift police and hold them accountable, that we can, build downtown and our neighborhoods. It shouldn't be mutually exclusive opportunities. We have to prepare our kids for college and the trades and the tech, jobs of the future. And I think, we lead policy and conversations on the fringe, and it's time for somebody who understands how to speak to the majority of our city, that
Hmm.
understands that we don't have to operate on the fringe, that we can get things done together, and move our city forward.
So, a couple really quick final questions for you, fun questions. Your neighborhood you live in now is, which neighborhood do you live in now, currently?
I live in Kenwood.
Kenwood. And you've been there for how long?
I've been Kenwood for at least 30 years. I lived in
Mhm.
Douglas. My first home was in Prairie Shores,
Mhm.
right across from Michael Reese. Both my kids were born at Michael Reese. So, but I've actually, lived in the city of Chicago for about 35 years, and in Douglas for the first few years. And then I moved to 47th and
Mhm.
Woodlawn, right on the cusp between uh, when Gill's Liquor. I don't know if anybody remembers Gill, where you could drive up literally and get a beer. But so, yeah, so
Those are the
technically,
days.
yeah, Douglas and Kenwood, or North Kenwood.
So aside from those neighborhoods, what's your other favorite neighborhood in the city? Another neighborhood you really like in the city?
Oh yeah.
Just
Well,
name one.
Gra- Grand Boulevard, I think, is an up and coming
Mhm.
area. It's where there's a lot of engaged residents. I like going to Little Village. I think that's an area, again, where I enjoy other people's culture, and the vibrancy of that,
What do
and
you what
learning.
do you do in Little Village when you go there?
I usually, go
Get some good
eat.
food?
Yeah, so I really just I was invited there by one of my colleagues last week, and had some really good food, and just showing me around.
Mhm.
I think there are other areas,
You just have
South
you said,
Shore.
yeah, you only need to name one. We have a
Oh, okay.
wonderful rich city. You covered the ground. My final question is a real Chicago question, and it's about this time of year. It's about the snow. It's about dibs, and we all know what dibs are.
Oh, I believe in dibs. So,
You believe in dibs.
oh, I
Tell us.
believe in dibs.
You're
Well,
pro dibs.
because
Why?
anybody who has cleaned their car off in Chicago for hours and then clean that space out deserves to come back to that space. I would also say that I would seek to have a snowplow system that would eliminate the need for dibs. Another thing that I see in New York that they do, they have, opposite sides of the streets that they clean first. And so, cars know, not to park on one side, so that, snow shovelers can clean one side first and then the other. So, I would seek to bring a system like that Evanston does that as well. Other big cities, I think we can do that where, you display, on opposite or odd days that, we're doing the west side of the street first. And so
Mhm.
that would kind of eliminate some of the need for dibs. But in a big snowfall, if you're cleaning out your spot and it's taking you hours, it's just a courtesy to be able to come back and do that. But I've also seen people help with that in
Mhm.
ways that are very promising. With kind of older or elderly who need
Mhm.
help shoveling out. But yeah, I'm a dibs person.
You don't want to mess with those parking spaces. That's the Chicago tradition.
Yeah.
This has been a
Lots of
wonderful
traditions.
conversation. What's that?
I said lots of traditions. Dibs is up there with asking people, what high school you went into.
Hmm.
What high school are you from? Or did you
And
go
what?
to? That's a Chicago thing. That's a uniquely
Absolutely.
Chicago thing too.
And what parish you're from? If you're Catholic, which parish you're from
Sure.
as well. That's all good. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you very much, Alderman Sophia King, for joining us
Oh,
today.
thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. I love the conversation. We've been just answering things in sound bites, 40 seconds, 30 seconds. So it's really nice to be able to have a complete sentence and tell people, what our campaign is all about and how we're trying to bring people together really to move our city forward. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, and have fun out there on the campaign trail. And
I am.
thanks to all of you for joining us today for Block Club Live, the ballot. Stay tuned for our next show, which will be tomorrow with Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson tomorrow at 2:30 in the afternoon. And you can check out any of our interviews at any time on our website at blockclubchicago.org for the entire schedule. So see you tomorrow, and thanks for watching.